everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today my topic is about water. We're going to first talk about what is the freshwater, the general guidelines of it, and also what is the water molecule, or what are the tiny little particles found in water in general. Then we're going to talk about water ecology, which is the relationship between the plants and animals in the ecosystem, while also nutrient cycling, aquatic chemistry, and the food chain is all very important parts of fresh water. Let's move on to our first topic, which is about the water quality of fresh water. Freshwater has several different characteristics, and you can usually see this in rivers, lakes, and groundwater. Most of it is preserved in glaciers. As you can see, 69 to 70% is in ice. These are mostly located throughout the colder places such as the North Pole and South Pole. Most of the water that is fresh is found with little to no salt compared to ocean water, which is very salty. Only 2.5% of the total water found on Earth is freshwater, however, which poses some challenges to people. For example, humans cannot drink all of the fresh water that is found on Earth. They can only drink 1% of the fresh water available. This is because a lot of that water is already polluted, from oils being dumped into bodies of water to chemicals mixing in from agriculture related or even any other sources of pollution. They have a great impact on our water sources. And now let's talk about the water molecule. The water molecule has several different properties. Besides having 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 gigantic oxygen atom. The first one we're going to talk about is adhesion. Adhesion is when water molecules bond with unlike materials. So as you can see in this example, this is an example of 2 different kinds of water, one with clear water and one with blue water. And this paper towel connects the blue water cup to the clear water cup. And eventually you can see adhesion because the particles from the blue water is climbing up onto the paper towel, which means it is sticking and bonding with each other. This will eventually connect to the other end, which will eventually turn the clear water blue. Now let's talk about cohesion. Cohesion is when water molecules bond with each other. So this makes even bigger water molecules. So for example, if there's dewdrops on cactuses, you can see that there is water droplets binding together, creating larger and larger water droplets. A very common example of this is the clouds in the sky. Now let's move on to talk about aquatic ecology. Aquatic ecology, as I said earlier, is the relationship between the animals and the environment. This is because every single organism is linked to each other. And in this diagram, you can see that the frog probably relies on the plants for shelter, while the snails need shelter as well as some food. So all of it is connected to each other. But some impacts can be nutrient concentrations, temperature, water flow, and shelter, which can have an impact on the different levels of animal impact that it has on the water. But for example, the beavers can change the flow of the river because of its dams. This is just one example of aquatic ecology because the beavers are interacting with the water to change how it flows. A lot of other kinds of aquatic ecology are shown. And for example, we can also see that the fish needs shelter, which increases the link between the fish and also the environment that it needs to live in the water. Let's now talk about nutrient cycling. It is very important for nutrients to be recycled again and again near aquatic ecosystems in order for plants to grow. There are 2 different kinds of nutrients that plants need. For example, they need organic matter, which is or once was living, so it has cells inside it. Or inorganic matter, it was never living. And a common example of this is the air or even the rocks that you find in the soil. There are also two different categories of nutrients that plants will often rely on. First is the micronutrients. The micronutrients provide the plant with all the food sources such as calcium, chloride, manganese, phosphorus, and many more shown on this list. This is an example of zinc, and these are all found in the ground. Different levels of this indicate different environments and different healthiness of the plants in the water ecosystems. However, there's a different kind called macronutrients. Macronutrients need to be consumed in larger amounts in order for plants to be healthy, but they focus more on growth and metabolism, or how they grow and how healthy they grow. That is the meaning of metabolism. Let's move on to talk about aquatic chemistry. You might be wondering, why do we need to know chemistry when we're talking about the water? Well, there's a lot of measurements scientists can take to see the healthiness and how good the water or each kind of fresh water is. For example, they take a test about the salinity or how much salt is concentrated in the water. The more salt it is, the more based on it is seawater than fresh water. But however, the pH levels tell if the water is more acidic or alkali, which can depend, and based on the results, this shows if many kinds of animals or diverse species can live here. The dissolved gases means that how much of each gas is inside the water. For example, nitrogen as well as oxygen can be inside the water. So scientists also have to take note of that, as well as how solvent it is. This is tested of how well substances can dissolve inside the water. Some will be really hard because the water is denser than the object or the substance it is testing. Let's talk about more of the pH levels in the water. The pH levels are very important because if it's too acidic or alkali, which is more to the sides of the scale, this will mean that a lot of wildlife cannot survive in this. Fish prefer usually a 6.5 to 8 level of the pH scale. And as you can see, this is usually in between the neutral with some of acidic base and some of the alkali. But while lemon juice is very acidic, this can range from 0 to 6. Acidic things are usually very sour, while alkali things are usually very bitter, and some substances will also have foam forming at the top. Soap is an example of an alkali substance because it is very strong. Also, most of these alkali materials are also very strong and can be used for household cleaning. Also, an example is baking soda and even vinegar. Now let's talk about aquatic food chains. Aquatic food chains are very similar to the food chains that we see on the surface, such as the bunnies eating the grass, and the grass is produced with the sunlight. But one of the main starters of the aquatic food chain include the photoplankton. Photoplankton are little tiny greens and little tiny organisms floating around in the water, which can then be realized and eaten on zooplankton. Zooplankton are little bigger, and these include these tiny shrimp and krills that you can see these up close. These will usually rely on the photoplankton in order to reproduce and live. Now it comes our primary consumers. Our primary consumers are usually much bigger in size, and they eat the primary producers. The producers include the photoplankton and the zooplankton, which means that in this diagram, the bigger fish, which are the herrings, yellowfin tuna, which eat and control the amounts of the producers. Now there is going to be the very top of the list, which is the tertiary consumers. The tertiary consumers are the largest of the food chain, and they are the most responsible because they control the numbers of all the animals. Since they are the biggest, they are able to have access to all of this, and so if there is one shortage, this means that the whole aquatic food chain can be affected. My idea is that there's a lot of ecosystems in the water, but if we affect them, they will be very affected by the rising temperatures, which are currently in effect right now. So we have to be more mindful about it, because I believe if we don't take action, then we won't have enough water. There is such a limited source of water on Earth, and some people use it to their advantage and don't think about how important it is. There's also a lot of different kinds of water, so humans need to do more to help their planet. Thank you for listening. I hope you like and subscribe to my channel.